Me, Christopher here, and welcome back to yet another read-through of Code Lyoko, the Underground Castle. Now we will be in chapter 3 and 4, and again, I am sorry for any of the misspellings that this computer program will have trouble with. Misspelling or mispronunciation. Anyway, let's dive into it. On y va. C'est parti.
3 Eric Mckinsky, Massachusetts, United States of America, January 9th. So are you gonna be here for the baseball game this afternoon? Sure, I guess. I don't really know, I might have other stuff to do. Are you still stuck on that music group? It's not a group. It's the band of the century. So you keep telling me. The first to speak of the two boys sitting on the fringe of the pitch was 11-year-old Mark Holman, a slim youth who was pulling on a scarf and cap bearing the colors of the Ripety Indians, the school's baseball squad. The second boy, Eric Mckinsky, was of the same age, but was instead donning a fluorescent subdigitals jacket, the so-called Band of the Century. On its back there was a striking image of Gardenia, the group's new singer, hurtling over a guitar like a witch straddling her broomstick. In front of the boys spread the exposed and windswept playing field of the Ripety Indians. To their backs, the modernistic and somewhat oppressive frontage of Ripety School loomed threateningly, like an immense pink cube broken at random intervals with wide glass windows. Mark tore at tufts of the yellowish grass and sighed. Look, I hear you, the subdigitals are great and Gardenia is fantastic, but, great? Fantastic? She is divine. And this afternoon is their big concert, Eric. Can you hear yourself? You've gotten to the point where you can't think of anything else. You shut yourself in your room and listen to their albums. Then you go online and check their site, and then you channel surf to find their latest video, so what? Eric curtly answered, trying to hide that he was drawing an earpiece from his pocket and slipping it into his ear. It was perhaps the 13th time in a row that he'd listened to Love Love Punka, the band's latest single. They were huge. It's stupid. There's more to life than the subdigitals. Like what? At least it's better than standing here watching the Indians rip up the field, instead of the opposite team. You really should be playing for them. It was a low blow and Eric immediately regretted it. Mark's greatest dream was to play on the school team. For 2 years, he had attended every single training session and had tried any means he could imagine to convince the coach to take him on the team. But no matter how great his efforts, they were never rewarded. Mark was truly hopeless at baseball. At least I'm outdoors. But it's the middle of winter. And, in case you'd forgotten, it's freezing. That at least was true. They rose and ran to reclaim the bicycles that they had abandoned by the metallic net that surrounded the pitch. Eric screeched to a halt on the frozen driveway and left his bike propped against a mailbox on which someone had written McKinsky in crooked letters. Mom, I'm home, he yelled, opening the door. He let his rucksack fall to the floor as he unzipped his jacket. From the corner of his eye he glimpsed his mother in the living room, stretched out over a blue exercise mat. Hello, darling, she gasped. I'm just exercising. Eric's mother was an aerobics fanatic, and spent her mornings engaged in warm-up exercises, as she called them, and then in the afternoon she went to her gym. I'm going up to my room. I'll just finish stretching, and then come say hello to you. On his computer's monitor the words music, oh flashed. And then connect ion established. The loudspeakers blasted Love Love Punka at full volume, and from Eric's desktop background the violet eyes of Gardenia seemed to spy on him. There were 22 unread emails. The official Subdigitals newsletter, someone who wanted to buy his tickets to the concert and who was willing to pay any amount you want for them, and new messages from the Musico forums. He dedicated himself to answering those, retreating to his peaceful inner space. One user, a certain Lizette93, had written, Eric. Like this site has the awesomest content and you have all the answers and you're on these forums, so you must be a true fan like me as well. Eric was ready to delete the message when the next line caught his attention. But like to prove myself, I've got something super secret. A photo of Gardenia when she was worked as waitress and what she was doing before her beautiful voice made her one true star. If you want to see what I've found, click. Eric felt a shiver grip him. All true Subdigitals fans knew that before joining the group with the guitarist Freno, Gardenia had worked as a waitress at a restaurant in Boston called Skate Willie. And everyone knew that any evidence of Gardenia's time there, every photo of her, any scrap of paper with her signature on it, even the t-shirts she had worn, had all been destroyed by the band's manager when they became a major success. Not a single image of Gardenia in the uniform of a Willie girl was known to exist, and if one did, well, its value would be incalculable. Lizette93's email did not contain any attachments, just a link, and Eric's hand was trembling as he moved to click on it. "Here I am, baby," chirped his mother as she burst into his bedroom, wrapped in a cloud of peach-scented perfume. "Come downstairs, I made you a snack." Eric was still fixed on the screen, a vacant expression on his face. "I'll come now. 1 minute." His mother affectionately tousled his hair. "Heh, always on the computer. It's not healthy. Let's go, it's already 10 and you've not yet gotten anything inside you." Her tone did not allow for anything but a yes. Eric reluctantly realized that he'd have to postpone his rendezvous with Gardenia. And at that moment, inside the boy's computer, another being resigned itself to waiting. The digital creature floated shapelessly in an infinite void, without a name and without memories. For so long it had lain in waiting at the bottom of the sea. Like a larva enclosed in its cocoon waiting for the right moment to break free and become an adult. Then, lights had cut the darkness like a blade. A mechanical hand had approached slowly, sluggish under the weight of meter upon cubic meter of water. It grazed the surface. And so it had woken the creature up. But it did not understand why it existed. Nor did it know its purpose. It only felt a desperate need to win back its memories. It was sure they still existed, in some form, but where? It had to find them. They would help it understand what it had to do. The thing hidden in Eric's computer could feel that its memories awaited it, sealed in an invisible safe. It needed a key to open it. It needed an eye with which to examine the keyhole in the lock. Oh, yes. The eye. That was what it needed most of all, its eye. The eye of XANA. Eric meanwhile had downed a disgusting carrot frappe, while suffering through his mother's usual sermon, "You've spent the entire vacation shut inside your room listening to music. You could at least go outside with your friend Mark, or play some sports." While he had pretended to listen, Eric had felt a nervousness growing within him. He could not get that email out of his head. As soon as his mother had resumed devoting herself to her exercises, he had bolted into his bedroom and locked the door, to ensure he wouldn't be disturbed this time. "If you want to see what I've found, click." Eric held his breath, expectant. Then, the emotion transformed into fear. Not even the thought of the Subdigitals could penetrate this subtle terror, the sensation that there is something terrible behind the closed door you are about to open. His hand hesitated on the mouse. Click. Gardenia's great violet eyes did not appear on screen. There was no photo, to tell the truth. Instead, there was a drawing. In the center was a circle, with 2 further concentric rings surrounding it. The outermost one was broken by a single thin line at the top, and 3 thicker lines towards the bottom. "The usual con," Eric muttered in disappointment. Nevertheless, he continued to dwell on the drawing. What did it represent, exactly? A target? A symbol? Eric found it impossible to avert his gaze from the screen. He did not know why, but the design made something very specific come to mind. An eye. He clicked on it. For the underground castle, city of the Iron Tower, France, some time ago. In actual fact, things had been set in motion a little while before Ulrich had joined Jeremy down in the sewers. At the point where everything had truly begun, Jeremy was alone. Every semester Professor Hertz would announce a competition in class for the most original science project, and Jeremy had always won first place hands down. On this occasion he had decided to design and build a miniature robot, but he lacked some components needed to complete his prototype and the school had not been able to provide anything suitable for him. Then he had remembered the old abandoned factory not too far from Kadik, and realized that there he might be able to salvage something usable. And on a previous occasion, he had accidentally made an interesting discovery that now seemed provident, a secret passage that from Kadik's grounds led directly to the old factory. From the outside, The iron disc of the manhole cover was completely anonymous. But once raised it revealed a strange symbol, with an equally mysterious inscription, Le Phoenix Vert. The Green Phoenix. And that same symbol was stamped on the legs of the iron rungs down into the sewers. And it was marked on the walls of the culvert, as if indicating which direction to follow. And finally, over the entrance to the old factory abandoned in the middle of the river, the same symbol had once been printed, although it had faded with time. The Green Phoenix. Across the sun-beaten bridge, the disused factory was cool and dusty. The main entryway opened onto a balcony suspended several meters above the ground. The place was immense, high, and desolate. The walls were broken by footbridges and corridors, while steel beams supported cranes and other abandoned machinery. The windows were large glass grids facing out onto the river. Much of the glass had been smashed, and many of the remaining panes were opaque with dust. Nobody had set foot here for many years. Jeremy decided to explore the ground floor. The last workers must have left behind a load of assorted junk, truck tires, and pneumatics, electronic apparatus, girder sections, gutted pieces of machinery. As far as his robot was concerned, this was a gold mine. It was just a bummer that the stairs down to the ground floor had collapsed over the years, and all that remained of them now were just a few isolated metal steps that swung gently in midair. Jeremy then noticed two robust cables, hung from big hooks set in the ceiling. They were suspended just a short distance beyond the end of the balcony and extended right down to the ground, where they twisted snake-like into large coils. Those should take my weight. He seized one of the cables and pulled with all the force he could muster. There were no suspicious noises. It seemed solid. "Geronimo, oh," he yelled, hanging from the cable with both hands and parting them slightly to slide down. Seconds later he tumbled headlong onto the dusty floor, his palms burning from the friction. But he'd made it. He began to wander through the abandoned shed in search of anything interesting. Then, almost by chance, he noticed the lift. It was a basic metal container, activated by a device that was connected to a wire that dangled from the control box. On it was a single red push button, to descend down. Goodness knows where this goes, Jeremy mused, and he tried pressing the button. In all seriousness, he did not believe the old elevator could still function, but then the security grate slid down and an old motor whirred to life. Jeremy began to wonder if he had committed a serious error. After almost a minute's descent into darkness, the lift stopped and the grating rose again. A sensor released the locking mechanism on an automatic door, which opened with a soft hiss. The walls of the great chamber in which he had arrived were emitting a greenish light, cold and electrical. From the ceiling was suspended an imposing apparatus studded with electrical wires and tubing, terminating in a massive hoop which hung in midair, like a giant chandelier. Below, set in the floor, was another raised circle that brought to mind teleportation devices from animated cartoons. Only it wasn't a cartoon. It was real. And it was right in front of him. Jeremy was having trouble believing his own eyes. Down from the ceiling extended a mechanical arm that supported several extinguished monitor screens and a keyboard. In front of the monitors was a comfortable armchair with a series of push buttons built into its armrests. A command station. The pilot's console of a spaceship. In that moment Jeremy completely forgot his science project and every motive he previously had for being here. His brain was beginning to bubble over with thousands of new questions. Who had built such a thing in the basement of an old factory? Human beings? Aliens? And if so, then why? He approached the console and a quick glance answered his first question. In front of the luxury screens was a normal American QWERTY keyboard, of a type most often used by computer programmers. Ergo, this place had been built by humans. It was improbable that aliens would have used the terrestrial alphabet. But where was he exactly? In a military base? Or on the deserted set of a science fiction movie? Suddenly, Jeremy remembered the barbed wire that blocked off access to the bridge, and the various threatening signs scattered around the old factory, DANGER, private property, high-tension wires. He looked around himself and considered that there were possibly security cameras hidden in the room. His presence here was, perhaps, being recorded and somewhere an alarm had already been raised by someone. If so, they would soon be here to capture him. Someone could be coming to kidnap him and have him disappear forever. But no matter how hard he strained, he could not imagine who that someone could be. "If I've only got a little time left," he announced aloud to reinforce his courage, "I at least want to use it to try and understand all this." Then there was nothing left to do except to sit down in the control chair. So he did, and discovered that doing so served nothing. The chair's controls were extinguished, as were the monitors and keyboard. No power. Therefore, the solution to the problem was to find the master circuit breaker. Jeremy thoroughly explored the entire hall, the big computer affixed to the ceiling, the walls, the lights. He searched everywhere, but without results. He got back into the elevator car in which he'd arrived, studying its wrought iron walls and the control box with its single button. And this would only take me back upstairs, I guess. To verify his theory, he pressed the big red button and shortly afterwards was back on the factory's ground floor. He descended back down again into the computer hall. It had wasted him 5 minutes, but he was following one of Professor Hertz's maxims: the road to science is paved with experiments, nothing should ever be taken for granted. Now he stopped for a moment to reflect. If the lift was the only exit, then the master switch for the power had to be somewhere in the room. But despite his efforts, he had failed to find it. And if there was one thing he could count on, it was that things of its kind were always rather visible. So somewhere there had to be another exit, a hidden exit. Jeremy sat down on the computer's control chair, relaxed, closed his eyes. This was like a test. He began to spin himself on the chair's rotating pedestal, opening his eyes and shutting them again quickly in order to imprint on his mind multiple views of the room seen from different angles. The extinguished screens of the console and the keyboard, the bloated structure hanging from the roof. A green wall. The door to the lift. Jeremy stopped. He opened his eyes and looked at the door again. It was decidedly much too modern in comparison to the smashed-up sheet metal lift that was behind it. This is a security door, thought Jeremy. It serves to protect something important. In the room itself, nothing had power. Yet, the door was opening and closing without any difficulty. And the lift was going up and down. Where's the logic in all of this? Jeremy approached the door, trying to not activate the proximity sensor on the mechanism. The surface of the door was smooth and gave off an impression of sturdiness. Then, the boy saw something he had not noticed before. There was a metal panel to the right of the door, of the same color, but made from a different material. Jeremy placed his hand against it. Nothing happened at all. Evidently, aside from the automatic mechanism to open the door, everything else was disabled. Okay, so he had followed a false clue, but that was no reason to lose heart. He was now sure that there was another room somewhere. And there had to be a way to access it. He began to carefully survey the walls, tapping them at various heights and advancing only one step at a time. When he had circumnavigated the room's entire perimeter, without result, he lay down on the ground and began to inspect the floor, rapping on it with his knuckles until they began to ache. TOC, TOC, TOC. He began to doubt he would find anything this way, and it was now getting late. TOC, TOC. He would have to return to the academy soon, before someone noticed his absence. TOC, TOC. It was strictly forbidden to go away beyond the boundaries of the school, especially. TOC, TOC, Dong, TOC. Jeremy stopped. He crawled back, on his knees. TOC. Dong. Here. Dong. He felt with his fingers for the nearly invisible seams of the metal plate, until his fingernails found a slightly raised edge. He pulled his Swiss Army knife from a pocket and inserted the tip into the thin groove. He applied leverage. The plate lifted. He drove the blade in deeper and tried again, then threaded his fingers into the thin space that had been created, and pulled forcefully with both hands. And he raised the trapdoor. Below, there was a passageway, a dark hole that disappeared towards the bottom, and a metal ladder on which to descend. Through the passage, Jeremy entered a circular room whose walls were painted in the same warm colors as the strange devices that occupied it, but the main switch was certainly not located here. Before him, arranged so as to form a perfect equilateral triangle, rose 3 high columns that were connected to the ceiling by numerous cables, pipes and other strange equipment. On each of the columns was a sliding door, each orientated in such a way as to face into the center of the room. And all of the doors were sealed shut. It was immediately clear to Jeremy that the 3 columns were in some way controlled via a central computer and possibly the control station on the level above. But, what purpose did they serve? Were they launch pads? And to launch what? They seemed to be little more than ultra-modern shower cubicles. Jeremy decided to resume his search for the main switch. The only option left to him was to try going down further still. With a sigh, he slipped back into the stressful little passage, the solace of his gym shoes slipping on the rungs, and continued his descent. He was beginning to feel short of breath. Finally his feet touched the bottom. He was in the dark. He pulled his phone from a pocket and used its screen to throw a little light on his environment. And then, after a few passes, he noticed the door. It was square and solid, and mounted on double-acting hinges that rendered forcing entry with a crowbar impossible. Jeremy struck the surface with a closed fist, and the deep sound that emanated from within the door suggested that even an oxyacetylene cutting torch would have little effect. To the right of the door was a box made from white plastic, with a tiny screen like the liquid crystal displays on calculators, and an alphanumeric keypad underneath. The display was illegible from all the dust, and Jeremy rubbed it with his finger to clean it. Then, he pressed a key at random. D3L3 and D4 appeared on the screen. Jeremy sat on the ground, breathing deep on the stale air of the underground tunnel. Perhaps the strange code had something to do with the military alphabet used by the US Army. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. But what was the relevance of the numbers? Maybe this was a kind of equation that you had to solve, and the password was the answer. He tried entering some random keystrokes, and on the display the message ERROR appeared, and then, it reverted to D3L3 and D4. In frustration, the boy punched the concrete wall with his fist. Then he tried another combination. Error. D3L3 and D4. Jeremy tried to concentrate. The mysterious prompt was 7 characters long, but the error message contained a total of 8. So the password could be up to 8 characters, any of them a letter or a number. He got to his feet, discouraged. That was almost 2,000 billion possible combinations. He could have tried constructing a password cracker, a program able to sequentially enter all the possible combinations until it found the correct one. But where could he attach it? He could not see any plugs or ports on the box where he could connect a cable. And on top of that, the door was probably protected against such invasion attempts. It seemed a doomed enterprise. Jeremy left the factory just before it got dark. He returned to the academy and began to ponder the password prompt. He tried different search engines and read books on advanced cryptography, pure mathematics, the theory and practice of secret messages. He searched for the name Green Phoenix on every possible website on the plan. E.T. He tried to rearrange the letters, to order them in columns, to add and subtract them. Nothing. He tried to trace information about the factory, the previous owners, or their reasons for closing it, but, as before, he might have had more luck trying to coax a spider out of its hole. An entire day passed. Then another went by. Then a third. And, at last, he arrived at the solution. Jeremy was running towards Professor Hertz's study to ask to borrow some of her books, when he saw Principal Delmas coming out of his office with a person of uncertain age, with a white cascade of tousled hair and a full beard. The man resembled the missing evolutionary link between a Neanderthal and Father Christmas. "Thank you, Paul," the principal said to him. "That riddle had been driving me mad for weeks." "It was quite difficult, to be fair," the other observed. "I was just lucky." "Nonsense," the principal insisted. "There is no riddle I've seen you fail to solve. You are the president of our enigmatography club after all." Something tripped in Jeremy's brain. Maybe this strange person was just the help he needed. He flattened himself against the column, waited for the headmaster and the mysterious individual to overtake him, and started to follow them. At the door to the administrative building, Principal Delmas said goodbye to his friend, who continued on alone through the grounds. The perfect opportunity. In a moment Jeremy covered the ground separating them and approached the man. "Excuse me," he said timidly. "Yes, young man." He had eyes so clear they seemed transparent, and a deep, profound voice. What could he say? That he had eavesdropped on the conversation between him and the principal? That he had casually discovered a military supercomputer and to activate it had to open a secret door in the bowels of an abandoned factory? "Feel free to speak, my boy, I have a riddle that I can't solve." The man scratched his chin, thoughtful. "And you would like a hand," he murmured, as if torn between himself. "Speaking honestly, I should not really help you. The important thing is not the solution, but how we reach it. If I solve it, you will be denied the experience." "But you helped Principal Delmas, and I," Jeremy began, quickly cutting himself off. His companion burst into sonorous laughter. So you heard us, did you? Very well then, let's find a bench, where we can make ourselves comfortable while we make sense of your enigma. After they were seated, Jeremy hurriedly scribbled D3L3 and D4 on a sheet of paper and passed it to Paul, who focused his attention on it. After several seconds, he murmured, 8 letters. Yes. Jeremy exclaimed incredulously, thinking back to the display in the factory. How do you know? Perhaps you're a bit too young for this, but generally boys like you are much better with computers than us old fogies. Haven't you ever used LeetSpeak? Jeremy nodded. To be exact, Leet or L33T was not a proper language, but a trick used by computer programmers to create complicated but easily remembered passwords. You simply replace some of the letters with numbers or symbols that resembled them. So, for example, love became L0 \/3, and victory became \1CT0 re. In fact, Jeremy had already explored this possibility. But, if transcribed using the principles of Leet, D3L3 and D4 became Delenda. And that word meant absolutely nothing to Jeremy. I did consider that, he explained, but I discarded it because the result is a nonsense word. Delenda. Paul smiled. I'm sorry to contradict you, but you're not entirely correct. It's actually a Latin word that means, that which must be destroyed, more or less. And did you know this word was once famously used by someone? No, Jeremy admitted. His strength was in the sciences, not ancient languages. Cato the Elder, a politician of ancient Rome, motivated his peers to declare war on the hostile Carthaginian Empire by concluding all of his addresses to the Senate with the phrase, Carthago delenda est, or rather, Carthage must be destroyed. 8 letters. Carthago has 8 letters, murmured Jeremy, light dawning on his face. He took Paul's pen from his hand and, on the piece of paper scribbled, in shaky handwriting, C4RTH4G0. You have my compliments, my young friend. That was the solution. Jeremy packed a rucksack with a battery-powered torch and his laptop computer, checked that the corridor was clear and slipped out the door of his room. Then he thought for a moment and doubled back. From under his bed he pulled out his old collapsible scooter, so that the trip through the sewers would be quicker. He crossed the grounds of Caddock and lowered himself into the manhole. When he disembarked the lift that had lowered him into the old factory's first sub-level, he stood in silence for a second and regarded the chair in front of the extinguished screens. Soon I'll know if I have the correct solution, he said grandly to himself. Then he descended down the shaft, the lit torch suspended from a cord looped round his neck. When he reached the deep bottom of the complex he was sweating and his fingers felt like they would never recover from having gripped tightly onto all the metal rungs of the ladder. Jeremy wiped his forehead using the fabric of his jersey and directed the torch's thin beam of light onto the small door. The same word was still flashing on the display of the security box. D3L3 and D4. The boy took an expectant breath, and then he began to key in the solution. As soon as he entered the 0 in C4RTH4G0, a new word appeared on the display. Access. And the lock on the door released with a dry clack. The door swung half open and a strong and clear light shone through. Jeremy pulled on the door to open it completely and finally stepped through to the other side. He had expected a room filled with tens of dark cabinets that reached to the ceiling, an indeterminate number of computers whirring calmly. But on the contrary, before him he saw only a great cylinder covered in strange dark symbols, more akin to a modern art sculpture. It did not seem to be a computer like any other, it was something completely new, a technology Jeremy had never seen before. Goodness knows if this still works, he said, and his voice reverberated through the empty chamber. There was only one way to be certain. He discovered the master switch at the base of the cylinder, a simple lever-actuated relay. After a moment's hesitation, Jeremy pushed it down. A clear blue spark spat from the relay. Jeremy returned to the control room to establish if anything had happened. Breathing deeply he sat in the armchair. His weight triggered a sensor and unexpectedly the monitors lit up, while from the circular pad built into the floor, which the boy had imagined to be a teleporter, rose a cone of green light. It was a kind of projector. On the monitor rows of characters began to align themselves into a programming language completely alien to Jeremy. Fascinated, he began to explore the amazing computer and, while his fingers ran across the keyboard, the beams of light from the projector drew a three-dimensional sphere that floated in midair, a giant world map, subdivided into 4 segments. At the core, translucent, a brilliantly white nucleus sparkled. A map, he breathed emotionally. A map divided into 4 sectors. Jeremy was now certain that he was in some kind of military base. But the floating sphere did not resemble planet Earth. He didn't recognize any of the continents. He began working the keyboard, trying to crack the system until somehow he managed to call up name fields over the 4 sectors. Lyoko Forest. Lyoko Ice. Lyoko Desert. Lyoko Mountains. Lyoko. Jeremy increased the zoom and the image split into sections. 4 gigantic slices of watermelon connected by the unnamed core. The core was white, while the 4 sectors had individualized colors. Forest. Ice. Desert. Mountains. Jeremy was perspiring, the glasses sliding down his nose and their lenses misting up. His fingers shook as they pressed keys, becoming more and more engaged, issuing unsuccessful commands in an attempt to get to the bottom of this. Zoom. Access. Core. Access. Enter passcode. Access denied. Nothing could force it open. He was not getting in. And what of these strange images that represented fantastic continents? 4 sectors, and a white core that seemed inaccessible, with no other clues. Enter passcode. Access denied. Okay, thought Jeremy, let's try one of the sectors. Zoom. Back. Back. Forest sector, access. Enter passcode. Access denied. Connection required. What connection? Asked Jeremy, grinding his teeth in frustration. What could you connect to? Other text began to whirl onto the screen. Active scanning. Searching for human agent. Search H complete. Human agent located. Tower 3, Forest sector, establish connection? Jeremy could not understand any of this. Now the screen was focusing on a region that had to be the Forest sector. In one corner of it a little red dot was flashing. Establish connection? Damn it, what did this mean? Was the little red dot the human agent? Calm down. Jeremy told himself, forcing himself to breathe. The gigantic supercomputer, hidden in the heart of this abandoned factory, now seemed to be running an extremely elaborate video game. Maybe it was one of those online role-playing games which allowed people to log in and play from anywhere in the world. Perhaps all it meant was this: the human agent was another player, who was in the forest sector. In Tower 3. On Lyoko. Whatever that meant. Jeremy remained immobile. If he had really reactivated an old video game, then why had it been turned off in the first place? And why was it in a place like this? An old factory. Older than the technology hidden in it. He began to feel afraid. Entering had been all too easy. As if someone had wanted him to enter. But who? This isn't a game, he whispered, gritting his teeth. Virtual reality, yes. But not something for playing on. In that case the little red dot, the human agent, could be anything. Possibly even something dangerous. Perhaps the best course of action would be to turn everything back off. And then walk away. Forget. And finally finish his science project. But Jeremy knew he could not. He was sitting here, before an impossible computer. And he had to discover what purpose it served. He had to know more. Press Y to connect to agent. Here we go, Jeremy said aloud to bolster his resolve. Let's connect. His finger stabbed the Y key. The screen abruptly went to black, and then something moved. Jeremy closed his eyes in an instant of terror. When he reopened them, he was looking at the face of a girl. Her helmet-like hair was a strange, intense pink, and fell in a long fringe across her forehead, broken at the sides of her face by 2 strangely pointed ears, like those of an elf. Her delicate features were emphasized by exotic makeup, 2 vertical stripes, the same color as her hair, that followed the soft curves of her cheeks. From her half-closed mouth there came the sound of the calm breathing of someone who was deeply asleep. She's beautiful, said Jeremy in a low voice, deeply affected. At that instant, the young elf girl opened her eyes. They were large and brilliant, the color of forest foliage. She looked around herself, disorientated. Behind her was a black wall, on which numbers and senseless symbols flowed, like leaves blown in the wind. Where am I? She asked eventually. Then she seemed to look straight at Jeremy. And who are you? Jeremy jumped back into his chair. You mean me? But that means, you can see me. Though Jeremy could not see them, He now realized that there had to be a hidden webcam, microphone, and loudspeaker array built into the console. But what was happening? However hard he tried, he could not think lucidly. "Aren't you, that is, well, in short, what are you?" he stammered in confusion. "I don't know what I am." "But what are you?" replied the elf. I am a boy." "Well, then I am a girl. I think." Jeremy was still not willing to believe his eyes. "Could you tell me how I wound up in here?" Jeremy didn't know how to respond to that. "Don't you remember anything?" The girl creased her eyes and looked around herself again. She seemed frightened, and then she shook her head disconsolately. "What were you doing before this?" Jeremy said, attempting to jog her memory through persistence. "I was sleeping." "Sleeping? For how long?" "I don't know," replied the girl, sounding more and more confused. There was an uncomfortable silence, and Jeremy decided to introduce himself. "My name is Jeremy." "Jeremy, it's a beautiful name. I like it." For the first time the girl smiled faintly. Then her face darkened again. "I don't remember if I even have a name." "Well, let's choose one," Jeremy proposed. "If you don't know your name, how about I decide on one for you? What do you think of Maya?" The girl squinted her eyes, in a way that Jeremy found absolutely irresistible. "Maya," she repeated, "I like it. Maya and Jeremy. So are we friends now?" Jeremy thought this was all very strange. But he answered without any hesitation, "Of course. You and I are friends." 5 Maya's Sleep, City of the Iron Tower, France, some time ago.
Okay, does anyone have the indication that Paul should sound to be like Frank Hopper? And again, the way that Jeremy found the factory and found Ilea and the interaction is all in the same continuity as XANA Awakens from the season 3 prequel. It is all interesting. I mean, it's like I'm watching Code Lyoko all over again. It's amazing. And now we're diving into a little bit of the science behind a little bit more in XANA Awakens. A little bit more into the history of how Jeremy came across the computer and just didn't find it all perchance, instead of one big flashback. We are finally getting to see the roots of his discovery. It's really starting to sound like XANA Awakens, and I love that. Absolutely freaking love. But that's gonna be the time that I have for today, as I got other plans to do. Drop a like in the comment and see how you guys like it. And stay tuned for next week where we cover chapters 5 through 6. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bon chance!